Hi there. Thanks for joining me here on Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga and the creator of the Momentum Magic Method, the way to become a confident teacher, one who effortlessly walks around the room, shares clear cues, easily builds sequences, and speaks from your heart, sharing authentically with your students. Here on the podcast, you'll discover new and inspiring ways to share your cues and create your sequences. You'll uncover habits and frameworks all designed to empower you so that you can teach in a way that feels authentic and natural. For some episodes, I'll have a guest, and other episodes I'll share with you on my own, and in each one, you'll always get action steps and takeaways you can apply right away to your teaching. In addition to the podcast, follow me on Instagram and TikTok for daily videos. You'll see a link on both of my profiles, my Stan Store link. Click it and unlock ways you can get the support you need to be the teacher of your dreams. You'll find links to the podcast, my free ebook, and other resources to help you be the best teacher you can be. You'll also find the link to my signature program, the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program, and you can see if you qualify to enroll. So with that, let's get on with today's show. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 364. I am recording this on August 14th, 2025, and this will go live on August 18th. And I'm glad you're here. Let's hop right into it. I'm going to share with you today, you're going to discover the connection between a particular study that was recently published in a medical journal and yoga. And I love when I hear about things like this because I think it really validates the work that you and I do as yoga teachers, and that all of us as yoga teachers do. And it's not like we're looking for validation, but I think that oftentimes yoga teachers undervalue the services that they provide. And I think that is reflected in the pay that they accept and even the pay that they're offered. And I don't want to go completely down the road of the financial aspect, but I think what we're paid is a direct reflection of how we're valued. And I know that oftentimes studios run really tight in terms of the revenue they bring in and what they have left to pay their teachers. But I think that this is an industry-wide problem. I think the pay that yoga teachers get is way too low when we start to look at the value that we're providing to the people who come to our classes. And when I heard about this study yesterday, which I'm going to share the details with you in a moment, it really highlights that the work we do is really helping people from a functional movement point of view with injuries they have, with chronic illnesses and diseases they might have, things like osteoarthritis, which is the condition we're going to be talking about today. And you could even start to make the case that going to regular yoga has an impact on your utilization of healthcare services, your medical costs, time off from work, and definitely from a longevity standpoint, doing regular yoga helps you with functional movement. And I think just anecdotally, all you'd need to do is watch people who are in their 70s and 80s who do not have regular movement as part of their life and see how they stand, look at their posture, look at their ability to move. I mean, I live in an area where there's a lot of older folks and a lot of them walk every day. And I see them when I'm walking my dog. And I'm always sort of observing their gait and their posture, and not in a judgmental way, but just in sort of a yoga teacher movement specialist sort of way. And it's very interesting when you start to look at that sort of thing, the kinds of really guesses that you can make about what people are doing, to keep their body moving in a way that allows them as they age to continue to move functionally and with health and without pain and just in a functional way. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I want to share with you the results of this study, and we're going to make a connection to teaching yoga, to yoga teaching, to doing yoga actually. And you'll get the link in the show notes for this study. And I really encourage you to take a look at it directly, in addition to obviously the conversation we're going to have here. So the name of the study is, or the name of the article, title of the article is Study Reveals How Small Changes in Walking Technique May Help Treat Knee Osteoarthritis. So osteoarthritis is basically a condition that all of us are going to get to some degree as we age. It's basically the wearing down of the joints, the cartilage in the joints, and the cartilage in part is there to cushion the joint and to provide for sort of a slide and glide type movement. Maybe not slide and glide, that's the wrong phrase. Provide for healthy movement, pain-free movement, because it literally cushions between the bones. And so when we're talking about the knee, we're talking about the base of the femur that sits in the tibial plateau, and we have the meniscus there that is in between those bones. And in someone with osteoarthritis, which is really a long-term condition that tends to get worse as we age, it can be treated with various things, and eventually, with respect to the knee, sometimes you actually need a knee replacement. So this type of condition can be very painful. I think I mentioned a second ago, it can be treated with medication, but people who have this, matter of fact, I ran into somebody I know the other day at a restaurant, and we sat and had dinner. And when we got up to leave the table, he could barely walk. And I asked him, I hadn't seen him in a while, what's going on? And he said, I went to the doctor and apparently I have advanced osteoarthritis. And he was walking like a tin man. His legs were completely like two sticks. So very debilitating without treatment. And when we get into this article, you'll start to see one of the miraculous things that this article raises. And it's really, of course, an article about a study. So I'm just going to give you some of the highlights here. The study itself was led by a team of researchers at NYU, the University of Utah, and Stanford University. And this study explored whether changing the way patients position their feet when walking could lessen extra loading, which is classified as stress on the joint during motion, and help treat the disease. So let's just dive into that hypothesis a little bit more deeply. So the scientists are curious to know as to whether changing the way people position their feet when walking, so that's considered gait. If you've ever gone to a running store and they've done a gait analysis, they're looking for how you position your feet. And start to think about this in the context of teaching yoga as you're watching your students. I hope you're watching your students and not practicing with them primarily. As you're watching your students, look at their feet, look at their arches, look at where the weight is on their feet, look at their feet in terms of their relationship to knees and hips. So we'll get into that more in a second. So they were curious as to whether changing the way patients position their feet when walking could lessen extra loading on the joint. And loading is considered stress on the joint. So this sort of relates to, if you've ever heard people say, don't let your knee go past your heel in Warrior One, that's a reference to increasing stress on the joint. Now that in and of itself might not be a problem, because when you do a yogi squat, your knee goes over your heel. So we can't look at these particular examples in isolation. We have to look at them in the context of the pose and how the person looks in the pose, what the alignment is. But when we look in this conversation, when we're talking about extra loading, it's referred to as stress on the joint. So for the investigation, the scientists tested this intervention in 68 men and women. So right there, I want you to start to get savvy about reading studies. 68 people is not a lot of people. So the results from this study are not highly transferable, but it's a place to start. So I just mentioned that. And the study did have men and women, which is really good because there's a lot of criticism right now about medical research that it's primarily done on men. So this had men and women. For the investigation, 68 men and women with mild to moderate knee osteoarthritis And they also used advanced MRI scans to track how well it works. So obviously, as a yoga teacher, we don't have that. But if you're watching your classes, you're going to be able to see what the alignment is in your student and make a certain assumption that with better alignment, they're going to feel better in the poses. That is a big extrapolation, but I just throw that out there as a thing to consider. The results suggest that those trained to angle their feet slightly inward or outward from their natural alignment experienced slower cartilage degeneration in the inner part of their knee compared with those who were encouraged to walk more frequently without changing their foot position. A report on the study is published online August 12th in the journal, The Lancet Rheumatology. And actually, that reminds me, I'm going to pull up the actual study because what I'm reading you now is the article, which is a summary of the study itself, but it's not the actual study. And then the scientists do go on to say, as I just mentioned, although our results will have to be confirmed in future studies, they raise the possibility that the new non-invasive treatment could help delay surgery. So that's a huge thing. And this relates to what I talked about in the beginning, in terms of the work we're doing as yoga teachers can delay medical consumption of services and maybe even prevent them with students coming to classes regularly, with you understanding the function, the fundamental components of anatomy, with you watching your students, with you asking your students questions at the end of class. How do you feel? Tell me how your practice is going. Like, these are the signs of yoga teachers who are knowledgeable, confident, involved, teaching transformative classes. And this is part of the way that you can start to pull out from people. Again, it's just anecdotal evidence, but some of this anecdotal evidence about the impact of yoga on their health. The findings also revealed that those who adjusted their foot angle reduced their pain score by 2.5 points on a 10-point scale. So imagine you're someone who has advanced osteoarthritis. You begin the study and your pain is at a level 8 on a scale of 1 to 10. And after the study, your pain is at a level 5.5. Like, that's huge. That might be, an extra dosage of Advil or Aleve or a narcotic that you don't have to take. That might mean more functional movement during the day. That might mean you can start walking for general health and wellness, or maybe even start a light jog or resistance training when you couldn't before. So start to think about what I'm sharing with you and how it translates to actual functional movement. Like, this is, again, part of what's available to you. The more you understand anatomy, you can start to make translations of things for your students in your classes so they can begin to see, wow, like, I'm going to keep coming to this person's class because I'm really learning how to build more health. And I'm learning ways to take it from this experience here in the studio off the mat into my life. Altogether, our findings suggest that helping patients find their best foot angle to reduce stress on their knees may offer an easy and fairly inexpensive way to address early stage osteoarthritis. So now, when they say early stage osteoarthritis and addressing it, now what we're talking about is potentially using yoga as a way to delay progression of a chronic disease. That is huge. That could be the difference of thousands and thousands of dollars and a debilitating disease condition advancing in your body if you are going to regular yoga classes. Okay, so I'm not going to go more into the study because then it goes into a lot of the actual study techniques. I'll just give you a couple snippets more. The new study is the first to show that tailoring each patient's foot angle to their unique walking pattern can alleviate the disease's symptoms in the long term and may slow cartilage breakdown. So take a look at an image of the knee. You can just pull it up on your phone. Just Google an image of the knee. You've got the meniscus between the knee. Above the meniscus is the femur, and the condyles of the femur fit in the tibial plateau. And the meniscus sort of cushions that section so that it's not bone on bone. But as people advance in osteoarthritis, it eventually becomes bone on bone, which is why they eventually may need a knee replacement. So what this is saying is if we change the mechanics of the foot, we can alter the load on the cartilage. We can alter the load on the cartilage, thereby slow cartilage breakdown. So imagine if you have the weight of, imagine if you have two books, and in between the books you have a slice of cheese, and the cheese represents the meniscus, and the top book is the femur, and the bottom book is the tibia. And imagine that that top book is angled in such a way where if you put your hand on that top book, you're putting more pressure on the one side of the book. That's going to kind of smush the cheese more on that one side versus the other side. But if you shift your hand to put it right in the center of the book and just press straight down without a lot of force, without a lot of effort, the cheese might smush a little bit, but it's not going to smush unevenly or as much. So now imagine the pressure of your hand on that book is basically the same as your foot positioning, because as you change how your foot is positioned, that translates up the kinetic chain to your knee and can affect the relationship between the femur and the tibia, and where the femur is putting pressure, load on that meniscus. And this is exactly the problem. If somebody, let's say, has a fallen arch in their foot, their femur is going to, quote unquote, smush the cheese more on the inside of the knee, versus if they're, when you go to yoga classes and people say press down evenly through the four corners of your feet, just with that one little shift, now you're evening things out so that the femur is not compressing the meniscus so much on the inside. Now it's just regular, quote unquote, regular pressure throughout the surface of the meniscus. And don't forget, you also have your fascia. The knee itself is a synovial joint, so it's in a capsule, like a sleeve with fluid. The fascia creates buoyancy in the body. There are other components of the knee, ligaments and tendons that create support, and of course the muscles. So it's not just knee, meniscus, tibia. There's all those other structures that sort of equalize the pressure on the meniscus. But if you're someone, and if you're overweight as well, that can add another factor of problem. Aside from that, if you're someone, let's just say, that has fallen arches and you're walking around with fallen arches all the time, that is going to provide or create a damaging situation for the meniscus there. Okay, so just FYI, for the study, the research team recorded the participants walking on a treadmill in a gait assessment laboratory, and a computer program simulated their walking patterns and calculated the maximum loading that occurred. So obviously, we're not going to have access to any of this, but when you read the study, you'll see the technique that they used. So now let's translate that to teaching yoga. So when you're teaching your classes, watch people's feet. This is, again, more proof, or I don't want to say proof, more support for the technique of doing the walk and talk versus the practice with me approach. When you take your students into that first forward fold, let's say you have a forward fold in the beginning sequence of your class, that's a great place to watch their feet. Look for fallen arches. Cue them to root into the four corners of the feet, or if you prefer, the triad. I don't really think there's much difference. Honestly, I think even just speaking to their feet in any way is going to create greater stability and a more even stance simply by bringing their awareness to their feet. But watch their feet, because if, like we said earlier, if you see someone with fallen arches, you're also going to see knock-kneed. So that's a person you want to cue to get a little bit more on the outer edges of the feet, or press evenly through your feet, or ask them all, look at your knees. Are your kneecaps straight ahead? Right? The kneecap is the patella. Are the kneecaps straight ahead? This is a way to start to work into your cueing regular reminders to look at the feet. How are you standing? Where do you feel the weight of the feet? I like to even bring people into a forward fold and ask them to rock back and forth a few times, feeling for that place where the hips are over the heels, because that place is a very stable place. They could stay in that position for a long time because there's not a lot of effort there. And once they find that midpoint, like a pendulum finding its center, then you can spend maybe a minute talking to their feet. Another place you can do this is in that first mountain pose. Bring them up from whatever initial movements you do. When you bring them into that first standing position, ask them to close their eyes and then just guide them through a little bit of foot cueing. So these are different ways that you can speak to the feet and start to create greater awareness in your students as to their foot positioning. Now, the next thing to keep your eye on is the position of the knees. So in poses like tree pose and warrior one, you want the patella straight ahead. So look for that. Also look for, as people move into warrior two from whatever prior pose. Maybe you take them into warrior two from warrior one, or maybe you take them from down dog directly into warrior two. In warrior two, look for medial tracking of the knee because this is really common. It's common for people to let the knee slide inward towards the big toe. And this is exactly the scenario we're talking about here. If somebody's doing that over and over and over again, it's unnecessary wear and tear on that meniscus in an uneven way. It's that excessive loading that the study talked about. So the corrective cueing is to shift the knee midline, shift the knee, center the knee, lean into the pinky toe a little bit. I like to give these kinds of cues globally rather than saying it to an individual person because everybody, even those that look in alignment, can benefit from it. The other place to look for this is in triangle pose. Triangle pose is one where people tend to hyperextend their knees because mainly the front knee, because as they lean towards that front leg, they're typically loading more on that front leg rather than using the front leg and the back leg more equally. And as they lean into that front leg, now that knee also has to support the weight of the torso over that front leg and the weight of gravity acting as a force on the upper body. So that front knee is under a lot of load. And if the knee is super locked out, which is really common, it's a way people sort of compensate for the loading in that pose, the kneecap can sometimes tend to move medially again. So you want to watch those front knees and you can ask your students, slightly bend your front knee. As you slightly bend your front knee, root into your front foot and squeeze the muscles in your thigh, the quads. So this gets them out of hyperextending the knee and gets them more into the muscle, the muscular support for that front leg. And then also cue them, do you feel your back leg? Do you feel yourself rooting down into your back heel? Get them more connected to that back leg. So these are different ways. There's so many different examples. These are different ways though that you can start to integrate cues to the foot. And this directly relates to what they're talking about in this study. Even though this study is talking about gait analysis, make no mistake about it. If you work with your students like this, they will change their gait as well. And the key really is to understand the anatomy and to, with that understanding, be able to share anecdotal examples with your students, just off the cuff suggestions and remarks to really start to bring this to life, from the cues to really bringing in real life examples. The ability to do that absolutely comes from your understanding of the fundamentals of anatomy. And I know you know this, that I have a program. I have two programs, a one-on-one program and a group program. And if you know that you're missing that piece, enroll in one of my programs and let's get that piece completed so that you can go out there and start to do the kinds of cueing and make the kind of impact that we're talking about here in this episode. I'm going to talk about both programs at the end of this episode to let you know about some of the details. All right, so that covers the first thing I wanted to share. The last thing that I wanted to share is I'm recording this, as I mentioned, on August 14th. In September of 2025, and I don't know when you're listening to this, but if you're listening to this in August, you still have time to possibly grab one of the 10 slots in this. I'm going to be doing a book club, and I'm going to be reviewing themes from the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. This book came out about 15 years ago, but it was really transformative and revolutionary when it came out because it talks about the life of a creative and the internal struggle that creatives often go through. And make no mistake about it, as a yoga teacher, you are a creative. I am a creative. We are in a creative space. It's in part creative, it's in part other things too, but it is a creative endeavor to create sequences, to express yourself, to go into a room with a bunch of people you don't know and guide them through this thousands of year old practice. There is so much creativity in that. And it's, I would say every single time I talk to a yoga teacher, and certainly my story, it's fueled by passion, passion for yoga, passion for helping people. So this book has so many themes in it that speak to oftentimes what can feel like a struggle. I talk to a lot of yoga teachers, and certainly those who do enroll in my program oftentimes share with me feeling like teaching yoga is hard, but yet I really feel compelled to do it, or I really want to teach, or I really want to keep teaching, but I'm just feeling like I don't feel really comfortable when I'm in the room. I feel nervous and I don't feel super confident. So there's this sort of internal struggle between this is something I want to do, and I feel sort of driven and compelled to do this. And at the same time, I'm having a hard time with it. So this book talks about that. And of course, it talks about it through the lens of an author. If you aren't familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert, she is the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And years ago, when that book came out, it was a blockbuster, and it eventually became a movie with Julia Roberts and Xavier Bardem. And it just was just an illustration of her writing skills and a personal, really deep personal struggle she was going through in her life. Big Magic was her book talking about that struggle that she pretty much goes through all the time being a creative person through the lens of an author. But when I read this book 15 years ago, there were so many themes for me as a yoga teacher. And I never actually did. I always wanted to do a book club on this book, and I never did it. And now I was inspired a couple weeks ago in thinking about what kind of programming do I want to offer in 2025 in September, in the fall of 2025, or really the last part of 2025. And I was like, I want to do this book club. So before I get into just one little piece about a theme from this book, let me share with you that if you're listening to this episode in August of 2025, there are just 10 slots for this book club. It is a free experience. I'm not going to charge for this. And it's really only going to be a live experience. The time of the meetings will be a weeknight evening, most likely a Wednesday night, East Coast time, 7 p.m. So if you can't make that kind of date time in September, it'll be 4 sessions. Unfortunately, this won't be an option for you. But if you live in a time zone where 7 p.m. Eastern time during the week would work for you for 4 weeks in September of 2025, then send me a DM on Instagram and I'll get you on the wait list. There'll be more details coming out about the exact dates, the 4 dates and time, towards the end of August 2025. So let me just share with you one of the themes from Big Magic, because this gets into something we talked about in the last episode. And I don't know if you caught the last episode, but I talked in the last episode about the problems of being an overthinker. And when you're an overthinker, it can be really debilitating for you as a yoga teacher because you're always questioning, am I doing it right? Am I doing the right thing? And I probably should have, oh, I should have pulled the quote out before I started recording. I'm just looking through my notes here. Oh, here it is. So being an overthinker is really similar to being a perfectionist because in either case, nothing you're ever doing is right in your mind. And one of the things that Elizabeth Gilbert writes in this book is such a insightful statement. She says perfectionism is just a high-end, hot version of fear. I think perfectionism is just fear in fancy shoes and a mink coat, pretending to be elegant when it's just terrified. Because underneath it all, perfectionism is nothing more than a deep existential angst that says again and again, I am not good enough and I will never be good enough. And this is so much at the heart of every conversation I have with a teacher who enrolls in, especially my one-on-one program where we get to do one-on-one coaching. It's that fear that I'm not good enough. I'm going into these classes and I don't think my students like what I'm offering, or, I'm worried they're going to get hurt, or I'm worried that I don't know enough, or I'm worried that my sequence isn't good enough. And therefore, what I do is I might change my sequence all the time, or even change my sequence at the last minute, thinking, oh, let me just tweak this one thing. And again, I talked about that a lot in the last episode, but it really speaks to this idea that whether it's perfectionism or being an overthinker, underneath that is fear. And, that's one of the things that, again, we don't really talk about fear in the context of teaching yoga, but it is for so many teachers part of their experience. And even if they don't recognize it as fear, and maybe this resonates with you, if you don't recognize it as fear, because that takes a tremendous amount of courage and honesty, and it really takes insight that oftentimes is hard for one to have about oneself. That's why the work that I do when I do these one-on-one coaching calls with teachers can be so transformative for them, because just having somebody to talk to who's a fellow yoga teacher, and the way that I support and coach teachers on those calls is a very specific way to allow them to have realizations that is really, it's really hard to have those kinds of realizations on your own, just sort of pondering and journaling and thinking by yourself. So I just wanted to share that with you, just to kind of give you a little taste of what's in there. If you can't make the book club, I would highly encourage you to buy the book. It's an absolutely amazing book, and I'm actually looking forward to rereading it over the next 2 weeks before book club starts. And, in terms of the format of the book club, I'm really going to pull out different uh, parts of the book and present them to the club, and then open it up for discussion by asking specific questions. So you don't have to read the book to be in the book club. And I don't want you to get nervous like it's going to be like you're in school or something. I'm going to provide a lot of sort of prompting and support and structure to really help you learn something from the book and apply it to your life in your own way. Of course, it's going to be slanted towards yoga teachers, but these topics are really broad. So coming to this book club is going to be an experience in building your confidence and your feeling of empowerment towards yourself, and just feeling really good about yourself in exploring a lot of the topics that come up in this book. So again, send me a DM. And then the last thing I'll say, which I mentioned before, is if you know that you have a learning gap around anatomy, my two programs are just two options that you can consider. One is a 4-week program called the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator, and in 4 sessions, I take you through the fundamentals of anatomy and how to apply it to teaching. And the other option I have for those of you who really prefer one-on-one support is my Yoga Anatomy Blueprint program. And that's a 90-day program, and it provides you with one-on-one support. And when I was just talking before about the coaching calls are part of that program. And that program takes a deeper dive into the anatomy, and also really working with you one-on-one around the mindset piece. that is a piece that we don't get into as much in the accelerator program because it's a group program and we don't have as much time. But in the one-on-one program, you will absolutely transform. Both of these programs have really just amazing testimonials on the pages. And so you can see for yourself the kinds of shifts that yoga teachers have made. So I would say, both of these programs work for teachers who are looking to learn anatomy. They feel like when they're in their classes, I'm not really confident sharing the cues. I really want to be able to do things like understand why people are out of alignment, provide them cues that really meet the moment of what's happening. I want to be able to create a sequence with a peak pose and really understand the logic behind it. Having the confidence to share cues and walk around the room and really feel like I know what I'm doing. And that is in part a mindset piece, but it also comes from having that solid foundation of anatomy. And the really cool thing about it is in either the accelerator or the blueprint program, you don't have to do any work to figure out what to learn. You're going to be using, in both programs, you're going to be using my 10-step blueprint. I've refined this over the past 15 years, so it's so easy. You just follow the steps 1 to 10, and that supports your learning of anatomy. And then in both programs, in the accelerator, you get the 4 group trainings that are live. And in the Blueprint Learning Program, you get the one-on-one calls. So in both scenarios, I'm there to support you the whole way. I do not believe in trainings that are just watch a bunch of videos. I think videos are great, but I really think to learn anatomy and to build your confidence, you need to have contact with the teacher, the author of the program. And it really frustrates me when teachers enroll in my program after they've spent thousands of dollars enrolling in just an online only, video only program. And of course, they didn't get the results they want because you need to talk through this with the expert. And so that's why I have those live trainings as part of the accelerator and do the one-on-one calls as well to make sure you're learning, to make sure you're shifting, to make sure you're transforming, to make sure you're getting the results you want. That's what gives me joy. That's what gives me purpose, is knowing that I'm working with teachers who are shifting in the ways that they want to. So I'll include links to both programs in the show notes. Both programs are right on my homepage on my website, which is barebonesyoga.com. And both programs are also linked right off my TikTok and my Instagram. And one final thing, I'm always on TikTok and Instagram. So if you're not connected with me there, connect with me there, and there's lots of videos on there that I do. And I also go on Instagram Live, so maybe I'll see you on one of the lives. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope that you found this helpful. I'd love to know something that you found interesting or helpful from today. So send me a DM on Instagram and let me know. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next episode. Namaste. Thanks for being here with me today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. And hey, one more thing. While I don't know you personally, I know what a yoga teacher looks like who's ready to have a breakthrough to being the kind of yoga teacher who walks around the room, sharing cues you know the reason for, understands anatomy, teaching signature sequences without notes or any need to practice with class, and loves teaching yoga without stress, anxiety, or nervousness. If you are ready to be that yoga teacher, here is your next step. DM me the words podcast offer, and I will give you a special incentive to work with me inside of my signature program just because you are listening to the podcast. DM me on Instagram at Bare Bones Yoga. I can't wait to hear from you.